I stared upward, trying to glimpse the stars through the thick canopy of trees. My birthplace was somewhere out there. I had come to believe I would never see it again. I closed my main eyes, trying to remember it in detail, trying to remember the faces of my family and friends. But their faces kept fading away and changing into other faces. Jake, Rachel, Tobias, Cassie, Marco. The humans amazed me with their resilience, their ingenuity, and their bravery. They delighted me with their humor, their passions, and their capacity for play, their food. But they truly sickened me with their self-indulgence and their childishness. But then, I reminded myself, they are children. So am I. If I were at home, I would still be a cadet in the Andalite Military Academy. I would spend most of my time in my parents' scoop. But I had been thrust into the midst of this raging war on Earth. I had seen more battles, death, and destruction than many seasoned soldiers in our Andalite fleet. I felt my throat tighten and constrict. My heart ached with a pain I could not describe. I wondered if I were dying. I felt not sadness. I felt pity. For myself, for all of us. We were children no longer. And we never would be again. This video is brought to you by Patreon. Patreon! Because I don't want to work in retail anymore. Our book opens with Axe, Rachel, and James scouting out Yeerk operations in town. The Yeerks are now rather openly herding people into the subways, a mix of the Yeerks' National Guard controllers and actual Hork-Bajir. Yes, people, the secret invasion is over, and Yeerk-controlled Hork-Bajir are freely roaming the streets and forcing hundreds of scared people underground. Again, what the hell were the reprints going to do if they got this far? While word on the Yeerks is technically out, the Yeerk operations are still mostly isolated from the rest of the world, so if you're not living in the city with the Yeerk Pool under it, you're not really seeing it, and it's easier to dismiss it all as some kind of hoax or over-the-top X-Files marketing. If this happened today, you'd have had 100 people taking thousands of pictures and videos with their phones, getting tons of information out onto Twitter and other social media at lightning speed. TMZ would spot some TV-level celebrity getting dragged by a Hork-Bajir. Omar Benson Miller manhandled by demons or something. Some guy would put up a Reddit thread, "I'm in line to be processed by our new alien overlords, AMA." So it turns out this team combination is not the most efficient. James is talented and a natural leader, but he's still very inexperienced in all of this and believes these conflicts less complicated than they actually are. Rachel has upped her ruthlessness a notch and is constantly itching for a fight. Axe is the voice of reason in this group, but Rachel isn't listening to anyone but Jake these days, and James assumes that Axe, as an alien, doesn't really care about human lives. So Axe's objections fall on deaf ears when Rachel and James decide to attack the proceedings, in hopes of stopping it. This is made way more complicated when another batch of morph-capable Yeerks show up in Bird of Prey morphs, who chase the three Animorphs into the subway tunnels. Hey, this is kind of familiar. Isn't this sort of how the last book opened? A handful of Animorphs in Bird Morph investigate some Yeerk movements, get attacked by Yeerks in Bird Morph, they fly and fight around a moving train. The main difference being that this time, it's deadly serious. After the last book's comedic runarounds, we're back to some seriously brutal violence, especially when everyone's going fuck it and demorphs and remorphs in the subway tunnels and just fights it out old school. Rachel buzzed the guards. One of the Hork-Bajir reeled back and fell onto the train tracks. On his way, his elbow blades accidentally sliced into the stomach of a second Hork-Bajir. There was a horrible moaning as both were electrocuted by the live third rail. Ah, there's the good stuff. No more Marco putting a tuba over Controller's head. We're back to some good old ultra-violence. A Yeerk and Falcon Morph tries to attack Axe, but Axe just knocks it out, because it ain't no thing. He captures the Yeerk, only to discover something kinda shocking. "Let me go," he begged. "Please, let me go! I am so close, only minutes away." "Minutes away from what?" I asked. "It only takes 2 hours, right? I've been a Falcon for 1 hour and 55 minutes. In 5 minutes, I'll be free." So, this creature wanted to be a Nothlet, wanted to be trapped in his morph. "You will not be free. You will still be a Yeerk inside," I pointed out. "I will be free," the Falcon insisted. "I will fly. I will see. No more need for Controna. No more orders. No more of this horrible war. I'll just fly away." Now, there is a number of angles to consider here. First off, the Yeerk could be lying in order to save its own skin. We never find out if it's telling the truth or not. We also don't know if this is a Yeerk that morphed into a bird, or a Yeerk that infested a host and then made that host morph into a bird. The vast majority of the Yeerks we see morphing are morphing through their hosts, the same way Visor 1 does. The only Yeerk we've ever seen morph from slug to animal was Aftran all the way back in number 29, The Sickness. If this is a Yeerk controlling a morph-capable host, then getting stuck in a morph would basically doom that host to be both infested 24/7 and to have their original body effectively destroyed. What a nightmare! But it also suggests something a bit more helpful, a more positive outcome to the Yeerks getting morphing powers than we might have assumed. We've discussed this several times before, but Yeerks are basically slaves to their own biologies. They infest other species because otherwise they are blind, deaf, and in most cases without much of a personal identity. Yeerks infest people not because they are out-and-out evil, though some are. They do it so that they are able to functionally manipulate their world, from basic tool use to gaining the secrets of intergalactic travel. Plus, learning to form your own ego is kind of like crack to the Yeerks. Morphing is a technological means of bypassing your own biological limitations, and giving the Yeerks morphing powers means they can gain all the benefits of taking a host without actually taking a host. Except maybe for the forming a personal identity thing. Most Yeerks base their personalities, their temperaments, and even their gender identities off their favorite hosts, and a morph is kind of an empty shell. Yeerks who haven't found their identities yet might have a harder time than most in becoming a Nothlet. But the idea of using morphing as a peaceful means of ending the Yeerk threat is an engaging one, even if the Animorphs don't at all have the influence to make that happen. Once combat is over, Rachel decides to go exploring the tunnels a bit, and discovers what everyone suspected, that the Yeerks have modified the subway to lead directly to the Yeerk Pool for quick mass processing of new hosts. The three of them leave and report this back in camp. This book is ghostwritten by Kimberly Morris, which means it'll play things pretty straight and be very Andalite focused. And it's also the very last book in the series to be ghostwritten. So I think now's a good time to kind of collect my loose thoughts about the Ghostwriters and their era in the series. Over the past 2 decades, information about the behind the scenes of Animorphs has kind of unfolded incrementally like an onion, though it's kind of a small miracle we got any production info at all. Books typically aren't that hectic collaborative media projects that television, music, or film are, and they tend not to warrant VH1 behind-the-novel lookbacks unless it's a serious cultural phenomenon like Harry Potter. Animorphs is probably the nearest thing a book can get to television, with its fast-paced release schedule, cross-marketing media blitz, and, yes, a large team of collaborative writers. I don't know exactly where and when information about the Ghostwriters first leaked. It was at least before the release of number 32, The Separation, in July of 1999, but this was the early days of the internet. So, between the fact that not everyone had the same access to the web, and the fact that there were hundreds of Animorph fan sites made in GeoCities with pages of rumors that made it almost impossible to determine what was true and what was bullshit, it took a long time for everyone to catch up. When I polled some of my viewers on when they learned about the Ghostwriters, answers ranged from pretty early on to, I didn't know until your videos. It didn't really become common knowledge till the end of the series, but when it did, most Animorph fans weren't too happy about it. The reasons for that are complicated,
But for me personally, it was because it went against the romanticized image of the singular author, sitting at their writing desk, hammering away at a typewriter. Books get a special reverence among the medias. We see them as more intellectually engaging than television or movies. Even books we admit are kind of trashy. And part of that is the assumption that books come from singular authors and are therefore uncompromised by outside interference. While it's true that a standalone novel has fewer cooks in the kitchen than most mediums, it's still a more collaborative effort than you might think. You have editors, proofreaders, professionals that you might call up for research purposes, illustrators, cover artists, and marketers, not to mention the numerous authors and artists one draws inspiration from. And for pulpy, monthly release sci-fi young adult novels with tighter deadlines and more money on the line, getting more people to work on it became a necessity. What's really unbelievable about all of this isn't that a lot of Animorphs was ghostwritten. It's that a lot of it wasn't. Ghostwriters have been a mainstay in mass-produced literature like this since the early 20th century with things like Tom Swift, the Hardy Boys, and Nancy Drew. I've made my peace with the ghostwriting era, and I'm now able to appreciate the things they brought to the table, from the wonderful weirdness of Ellen Giroux to the awesome character writing of Kimberly Morris to the kinetic energy of Laura Badiani-Wise. Not all of them were winners, sure, but this has been a fascinating study in style, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. So, to all you ghostwriters, I salute you. Back at camp, tensions are high, both because of the Yeerk subway operations and because of the animosity between Jake and Cassie, the reason of which the rest of the team still hasn't learned about. It's only been a few days since the Animorphs touched bases with the governor, and already her help and the help of Colonel Larson's troops have dried up and disappeared, so they can't use them to help stop this. It's Marco who suggests they load up one of the subway cars with a bunch of explosives, ride it into the Yeerk Pool, and blow that thing up. Too bad they didn't hold on to that nuke Axe was going to use on the city. Whatever happened to that jet anyway? There's a National Guard base close by, and Marco figures they might have enough dynamite or other explosives to get the job done, so they're probably going to have to pull a heist. They decide to sleep on it, but not before Jake snaps at Cassie some more. I shifted my weight from one leg to the other and observed the humans around me. Relationships were changing. Loyalties were shifting. There was unspoken animosity and hidden agendas. The decisions were becoming more about emotions than tactics. The resistance was jeopardizing its ability to be effective. I was told this might happen. Uh-oh, someone's got a secret. It turns out Axe has been spending his evenings sneaking up into the mountains and contacting the Andalite military through the Z-Space communicator to give reports. Axe tells him about the Yeerk subway operations and how the Earth resistance is starting to come apart from infighting. The Andalite commander orders Axe to not allow any action against the Yeerks to be taken. Yeerk forces are arriving to Earth in droves, and if the majority of Yeerks can be concentrated onto one planet, the Andalites can quarantine it. Quarantine, of course, being Andalite talk for carpet bomb the shit out of it until even microbes are dead. Say what you will about the Andalites, they don't have much in the way of variety in terms of military tactics. We could try genocide again. Third time's the charm. Axe's loyalties are conflicted. Again, that's kind of what he does. But at least this time, there's enough animosity and sloppiness from the Animorphs to push Axe away from his Earth allies. The next morning, the Animorphs get back together. Marco did some research, and yes, the National Guard base has a huge warehouse of 1,000-pound bombs, the kind of stuff they drop from planes. About 10 to 12 of these bombs could take out the entire Yeerk Pool. Cassie decides to publicly bow out of this plan. On top of the fact that the Animorphs have allies in the pool, she sees what would be killing tens of thousands of lives as monstrous. Cassie turned to walk away, but Jake grabbed her sleeve. Cassie, come on. Come on what? Cassie spit. You don't knowingly take innocent life. Not if you're a decent person. Not if you're not a murderer. The goal is irrelevant. I thought you knew that, Jake, but apparently you decided to start making decisions for me, Jake shouted back. Somewhere along the line, you decided that you knew what was best. For me. For everybody. Well, guess what? Cassie put her hands in front of her as if she were going to shove Jake away. Don't. Stop. Just don't, please. The rest of the assembled group was silent. I believe it was safe to say that none of us understood what was causing Jake and Cassie to argue so furiously. Tears began to roll down Cassie's cheeks. "I'm sorry," she said. "I shouldn't have done it. I don't even really know why I did it. The moment it seemed like the right thing to do. The only thing. Now, I'm just sorry. I'm sorry." "What is she talking about?" Marco whispered. "It was me," Cassie shouted. "I gave the Yeerks the morphing cube. I let Tom run away with it. I stopped Jake from chasing him, from killing him. Me!" I felt my back legs weaken slightly. Cassie? A traitor? It did not seem possible. Well, shit. Cat's out of the bag now. Everyone is rightfully pissed about this, none more than Axe. Not only did Cassie willingly give up one of their best weapons to the Yeerks, she gave up the morphing cube. Elfangor's morphing cube. Axe's brother died giving this technology to the human race in hopes that they might defend themselves. Losing it in a fight was bad enough, but to learn that Cassie willingly gave up the morphing cube destroys Axe. It's as if Cassie pissed on Elfangor's sacrifice, which, she kind of did. But it gets worse for Axe, because after the initial shock and some major yelling, the other Animorphs start to forgive her. Slowly, and maybe not forgive her completely. Not so much, "I understand you did the right thing," more so, "Well, what's done is done, no use crying over spilled milk," but forgiving her nonetheless. My hatred for Cassie began to extend to them all. They were fools. They would never prevail. They were too soft, too sentimental, too childish, too stupid and ignorant. Stupidity and ignorance within one's own ranks are more dangerous opponents than any outside enemy could ever be. I had been taught that lesson in the military academy. Now I had been given an object lesson that proved the principle. Axe has never felt so far away from his friends here, so far away from his adoptive family on Earth. As the Animorphs more or less group hug and then start hammering out the details on the plan again, Axe finds a corner to fume and wonder what he's going to do. Should he report this to the Andalite fleet? Why should he help a species that'll actively sabotage itself like this? He's no closer to an answer after confronting Cassie in private. She realizes how personal Axe is taking this and why, but she tries to spin it on how maybe this will give the Yeerks who don't want to be parasites a way out. Of course, nobody has an idea who among the Yeerks currently possess the morphing cube, and just how morphing powers are being doled out, though from what we've seen, it seems the Yeerks are handing out morphing powers like candy, which might suggest Visitor 1 isn't in control of distribution. He'd keep a tight control on one of the few things that make him special. Can I just stress that, even if Cassie does wind up being right about all of this, she's still a moron?